Greetings all, and welcome back to Simple Living Happy Home. Today we're going to be very casual, as you can see, and as promised, I'm going to walk you guys through the debt-free journey that my husband and I had to take in order to get where we are. So when my husband and I first got married, I had just graduated from PT school. He had been working as an EMT for about a year and wasn't really sure what he wanted to do long term with his career. So when we got married, we had my student loan debt. He still had some student loan debt from his 4-year bachelor's degree that he did. We still had his car loan, and I had a personal loan for my car with one of my family members. So what ended up happening was we kind of sat down and looked at everything and went, oh dear Lord, this is a lot of debt, because my student loans alone were 6 figures. We sat down with my sister and talked through how to set up an initial budget with her, and she did a great job with kind of getting us started off on the right foot. We were able to get a solid budget kind of figured out and planned, and it made a huge difference going forward because there were things that she helped us budget for that my husband and I totally would have forgotten about. Like, budgeting for insurance each month rather than just paying the bill, the twice a year or whatever. We first got married, I was working as a traveling physical therapist, which my pay was significantly higher. But that also meant that we were living separately. So we had 2 rents, we had 2 internet payments, we had 2 sets of utilities, 2 grocery bills, basically. I mean, we were functioning pretty much independently from each other. Initial plan was for me to continue doing traveling therapy until we had all of our debt paid off. Based on our income, we expected that we'd have everything paid off in about 3 years if I continued traveling. About a year into it, there was a job opportunity for myself and my husband within the same area, and so we decided that I would stop traveling, which ended up decreasing my income significantly. And his income went up a little bit, but not enough to compensate for mine. Inevitably, our ability to pay off our debt also went down, unfortunately. And so for the first year, we managed to pay off about $55,000, $55,000 to $58,000, primarily because I was traveling and I was making so much money. We were only able to pay off about $20,000 or $30,000 the next year or two individually, and that was super frustrating for me because I had already been in the mode of watching the needle on all of our debt move pretty quickly because of the pretty sizable debt payments that we were able to make, and now we were pretty much cutting it in half. So that was really frustrating. So I started looking into how much we were spending on various things, where our money was going, and was kind of appalled by how much my husband was spending on fast food while he was working and various things like that, and how much he spent on his video games. And so what this ended up doing was it caused my husband and I to have some pretty heated discussions, an actual argument here or there. And in one of those arguments, he said, well, because my thing was always trying to cut costs, and he made a comment about, well, why are you trying to cut costs? Why aren't we looking for ways to increase income? So I said, okay. So I started doing, if anybody's familiar with Swag Bucks, and it was a lot of time that I had to put into it, but I was making about $40 to $80 a month doing that. So it wasn't a ton of cash, but it was enough that, like I felt like I was contributing and adding to that income, because we typically would get that cash redeemed in Amazon gift cards, and then we would use that to pay for our Subscribe and Save orders. So I was doing that, but $40 to $80 really isn't that much, and it's not enough to make a ton of difference in your debt, especially when our interest accrual on my student loans was well into the hundreds every month. So I ended up actually getting a part-time job at a group home, and I told myself that I would only be there for a year, which I was, because they were doing a sign-on bonus. And so I stayed for the year, and that was the other thing, is you had to give it back if you didn't stay for a full year. So I stayed for the full year. I got the full sign-on bonus, which was good. But I was working, I would do my regular 8-hour day at my PT job, which I was also a kind of like the manager, the supervisor over the care center I was working in for therapy. And I would then go from that 8-hour job to, a lot of the times, probably 2 or 3 times a week, I would then go to the group home and work until 8, 9 o'clock at night. And then on the weekends, I would usually do like a 12-hour shift. And it was a lot, and it was intense, and I was very tired, but I did see a pretty significant increase in our income. We were able to put a little bit extra, but during that time period, there had been kind of a building mistrust between my husband and I, because I didn't really believe that he was invested in paying off our debt. I didn't really think that was his top priority, which it wasn't. I would get very anxious and very stressed because I felt like I had to guard and protect every single cent that would be going towards the loans, and that I had to fight and scratch to make sure I at least got the same amount of money that I did the month before. And so, he was usually the one bringing up ideas of like, oh, should we go and do this? Should we go and, do this? We should get one of these. We should buy this. And inevitably, his suggestions of purchasing things or whatever, it always came out of the student loan payment. And so I never believed that was a true priority for him to pay off our debt. It ended up coming down to one particular month where, at the time, we had a special entertainment budget, and my husband had used it all, along with his own budget, his petty cash, along with the work budget. He was the only one who used that, and various other categories that we had set aside. I was going to be going down to my parents' house for one of my niece's birthdays, and I left right after I got done with work. I actually had my car packed up and ready to go, and I left right from work, and when I left, I checked my phone because we use the app Monify for our budgeting. So I looked at Monify to see, like, okay, is there room enough for me to stop and get like a hamburger or something on my way to my parents' house, because it was like a 2.5-hour drive. And I pulled it up, and we had gone over in entertainment. And I texted him and I said, what happened? Like, what's the deal? And his response was something like, oh, I, bought something off of Google Play or Amazon Music or whatever, and just didn't even think about it and whatever. And I was like, really? You didn't even think? Like, this affects me, this has an impact on me when you don't even think when you spend money. And I was furious. And he said he was sorry or whatever, and I said, I don't want an apology, I want it fixed. So he ended up pulling that charge out of the entertainment budget and just put it into his budget, which it's like, okay, great. It doesn't solve the problem. Like, this is still an issue. You're spending money without even thinking about it. This is the problem. I went down to my parents. I didn't talk to him all weekend because I was just steaming and I was furious, and I was so mad. All weekend I was thinking about what I was going to say to him, why it was bothering me so much, trying to disconnect myself from the emotions of the situation, because I'm generally really good about compartmentalizing, but I struggle a little bit more when it comes to him, just because it's an emotional connection. I spent pretty much the whole weekend just trying to kind of calm myself down and figure out what I wanted to say to him. And when I got home, he had made supper, and I'm putting stuff away or whatever. And he knows I'm still mad. There's no secret about that. He tried to make supper, or he made supper to try to, make amends with me. And at this point, I was so far beyond mad and irritated with the money situation that nothing was going to appease me. So we ended up in a conversation, and it was genuinely a conversation. There was no yelling, there was no fighting with each other. It was just basically me laying it out there and saying, look, I don't trust you when it comes to money, and if I can't trust you with our finances, we may as well just be roommates, because there is no reason to continue to try to work together if you're not going to work with me and you're going to continue to spend money without even considering how it affects me. It was all very emotional. And it basically came down to, him saying, my video games have gotten to be an addiction. He was spending like $200 a month on his video games. I had agreed at that point that we were going to need to budget separately for a little while. One, because my husband's schedule was really crazy, because at that time he was also going through a paramedic program. So he was working, but then he was also doing his ride-alongs and clinicals down in the cities and various things like that. So it was more challenging for him to anticipate, bringing food with him and that sort of stuff. And so between that and just my serious lack of trust in his money spending ability, we decided okay, we need to budget separately until you're done with medic school. It was what needed to happen, because during those few months, we both learned some valuable lessons. One, I learned that his income did really make a difference, because I was getting a little high on my horse about how much I was making compared to him, and that, it was my income only that was paying off our debt and whatnot. And that wasn't fully accurate. When we were budgeting separately, the debt payments definitely went down. They did. So his income did make a difference. So I got to learn that lesson, and that was a good lesson for me to learn. He learned that a lot more discipline involved with staying on a budget and sticking to it than what he previously thought before. Made a point to say, okay, this is where I'm going to be. This is where I'm going to have my budget, because I did mine on paper. That was just easier for me. And he goes, I'm going to put it here. I want you to actually look at it. I want you to help hold me accountable. And I told him, I was like, well, I'm not going to nag you. I'm not going to say anything. If you start going off the rails and start spending money frivolously, I'm not going to say anything, because you have to learn how to do this yourself. You have to figure it out. And he's like, I know. He's like, I just want you to be able to see what I'm doing. I want you to be able to see how I'm spending my money so you can trust me again. I did on occasion take a look at how he was doing, and it was interesting when we started budgeting separately, because we agreed that the debt payments, the student loans, I took those on myself. One, because my income was higher, and two, because they were my student loans. If we wanted to go and do anything, like if we wanted to go mini golfing or bowling or go out to dinner, he paid for those. So it was almost like we were dating again. It was kind of interesting. So we came back together with our budgeting after he finished paramedic school. And the first time we budgeted together again after everything, I was probably the most nervous I have ever been about budgeting. Before we had gone through that period of budgeting separately and gotten into that fight and everything, I dreaded the idea of budgeting, but I wasn't like nervous about it. This was going to be the test to see could he change. And as we were doing our budget, we were going through and allocating gas and food and all the normal ones. And then it got down to the last two categories, which we always saved for the last, which were the loans and other, which was basically our miscellaneous if anything came up during the month. I don't even remember the exact dollar amount, but I was looking at it thinking like, okay, well, this is how much I would do. And this is just going on in my head. And he ended up suggesting that we put like 80 to 90% of what was left towards debt and the rest into other. And I went, really? Wow. Like, that was actually more than what I was even gonna say. And so that was kind of that pivotal transition of like, okay, we're figuring this out. We're gonna make this work. And so budgeting after that became so much easier. And I didn't really realize why it was that it became so much easier and more enjoyable, because I actually started looking forward to it. But the reason was actually traded positions on what our priorities were. So my priority had always been to pay off debt, and his priority had always been to, make sure that we were enjoying our life and having fun and going and doing things and going out to eat and all that sort of stuff. I don't have to constantly be worrying about how much we're putting towards debt, because he's going to take care of that. So now I can make sure that we've got money set aside to be able to do fun things. And that was kind of that moment where we both got to relax, because we knew that our primary concern was going to be taken care of by the other person, so we could just sit back and relax and make sure that the other person was being taken care of, which ultimately has become kind of the theme of our marriage. Is if he has a concern, he knows I'm going to help take care of it, and vice versa. After that, it wasn't all sunshine and roses and everything was fine and we paid off our debt and everything was great. There were definitely hiccups along the way. And I remember one in particular, he made a comment about, well, it's just going to be another thing. We're going to get the student loans paid off, and then it's just going to be something else. Then it's going to be, building a down payment for a house, and then it's going to be paying off the house, and then it's going to be this, and then it's going to be that. And he didn't realize that the reason why I was so adamant about paying off our debt and getting those student loans taken care of was because each month we had, several $100s of interest that was just going into a black hole. And it wasn't getting us anything, and it wasn't getting us anywhere. But when it came to, building a down payment for a house, that's all our money, and that was going to be money set aside to do something for us. This was when we finally really got on the same page about what the expectations and the dreams were for long term for us. And my thought process, my goal, my dream for us had always been that we would get the student loans paid off, and then we would be able to take like half of the money that we had been putting toward loans, put that towards a down payment on a house, and the other half would become ours to do as we wished. That really was where my thought process was, and he wasn't aware of that because we never truly discussed it. So it was always kind of like a big question mark for him of what was life going to be like. We had talked about what we wanted to do, but it was always in much longer terms, like 10, 20 years out versus 5 years. Once we really were on the same page with things, then came the hiccup of, okay, now we're deciding we're going to have a baby. Oh boy. If you want some of my pointers and tips on how to save money on baby in the first year, go check out my baby budgeting video, which walks you through how to set up a baby registry to maximize your cost savings and a few of the other tips and things. We had this looming in our future of, okay, we're gonna have a kid, and figuring out how to pay for all of that. And that was, I got pregnant months before coronavirus became a thing. So I was pregnant and gave birth in the hospital during the height of the coronavirus craziness. And the worst part of being pregnant during the coronavirus was the fact that we were trying to prepare for baby, but all of the thrift stores and stuff were closed. So I couldn't go to thrift stores to get baby gear cheap. And that was driving me nuts. That was literally I was freaking out a little bit because I'm like, we need all this stuff and I can't get it because I'm not going to pay full price, but I don't know where else. And it was crazy. So thankfully, there was some things that I would have preferred to buy secondhand that we ended up getting full price. Things opened up, at least the thrift shops opened up again. I want to say shortly after she was born, so we were able to utilize those resources again. It wasn't completely closed off yet, but yeah, that was crazy. So near the tail end of my pregnancy, we still had to finish paying off my car. We still had some student loans, and we still had that personal loan with my uncle. Now, my car was still accruing interest. So once the feds froze student loan interest, my husband and I went, great, we'll just pay off the car that much faster because that is still accruing interest. And so we had that paid off in 2 months, which was great. But then we're sitting there with student loan debt, little bit. I think we only had $10,000 left. We knew that the thrift stores were closed. We weren't sure of when they would open again. So we decided, okay, we're going to put the student loans, we're going to put all of our debt stuff on hold, and we're going to make sure that we at least have everything for baby for the first several months. So we took care of that. And then it was the very beginning of August. We made the final payment to the student loans, and that was completely done. Done, 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 done. It was wonderful. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, baby arrives. So we still had the personal loan to my uncle, which I had that personal loan even before we got married. So my uncle is a very generous and kind individual, did not charge us any interest. Worked with our financial advisor, John, and got a 529 set up for my husband for PA school. He went through and helped us with our retirement fund. There was a whole life policy that my parents had taken out on me, and it had matured. And he said, okay, the cash value of this is just about the exact amount compared to what you owe your uncle. So are you okay with cashing this policy in and using that towards paying your uncle off and being completely debt-free? I was like, that's not a bad idea. When we first started paying off debt, I was just in the mode of, I want to throw as much money at this stuff as possible and just, I don't want to really have to think about it. Because I was a brand new grad, I was in my first job, like there was a lot on my brain and a lot on my plate. I ended up just doing global student loan payments at first. And when things kind of calmed down at work and I could spend a little bit more time focusing on the loans and where things were at, I saw that when I would do those big global payments, the accrued interest wouldn't necessarily go down. I don't know how it figured it out, but there were loans that did not have all the accrued interest covered each month. It's like, well, that's stupid. So I tried the debt snowball, and it worked for a few months, but because of the massive amount of student loans that I had, I really did not feel like I was actually getting anywhere. Because the accrued interest, that was the number that always bothered me. And that number really didn't seem to change all that much when I would make a student loan payment via the snowball method. And it irked me. I never really felt like we were accomplishing anything. So a gal that I used to work with turned me on to this spreadsheet. And you put in all of your debts and the interest amount for each debt. And you could then select what type of payoff method you want to do. An avalanche. And I had never heard of avalanche before, but I'm like, what is this? So I looked into it, and it's basically where you pay off the debts that have the highest interest accrual. So sometimes it was one of the highest balanced debts that had the highest interest accrual, and other times it was one of the middle or the lower ones. From there is I used that as my motivation, because I could see every month, I could calculate how much interest would accrue, in June, and then after my payment, how much interest would accrue in July. And I could actually see and have it calculate for me the dollar amount of difference that it was making. So I could go, okay, we made this student loan payment this month. I'm saving us $20 next month, because that's $20 of interest that's not going to accrue. And then it's $40 and $10 and $60, and it would go up and down a little bit. But for the most part, that was the motivation that I needed to really tackle those loans. And being able to just start crossing them off, because as they got to a low enough dollar amount, it was like, oh, pay off completely. It's the one that's accruing the most interest, but I could just strike it off my list and, pay it off and be done with it. And so just being able to do that one after the other at that point was like, Now I feel the freedom. Now I'm making progress. That helped a lot. The avalanche method was definitely what worked best for me. Now, Dave Ramsey recommends doing the snowball method with good reason, because based on human psychology, we need those quick rewards in order to stay focused on something. So when it comes to paying off debt, if you do the snowball method, you're going to be paying off the smallest loan first. Okay? And when you do that, you get that little reward of that one's paid off. I have one less debt. Okay? So it reinforces that behavior with your brain. And then that money that would have gone to that lesser loan, or that lesser debt, can then go towards the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's how it becomes a snowball. You gradually build momentum, and the amount that you're able to put towards each individual debt each month. But like I said, it was the interest accrual that was really bothering me. So I probably would not have stuck with the snowball method, and obviously I changed to the avalanche. But I wouldn't have stuck with it to actually become debt-free if that's the method that we had continued using, because that interest accrual bugged me. So we were officially debt-free from about September, October of 2020 till June of 2021 when we bought our house. It was really cool. We still had things that we needed to set money aside for, but it was things that were going to be going towards us. It was a house, a down payment for a house. It was PA school for my husband. And it was stuff for us that was going to enrich our lives and make things better for us. And I mean, we set money aside every month for, baby stuff. Not that there was anything specific that we wanted to get or that we needed to buy, but it was just things that, if it came up that we wanted to get something for her, okay, great. We've got the money set aside to be able to do so. Since June of 2021, we still only have our mortgage as our debt. So that was our debt-free journey. I actually, after we paid off my uncle, I sat down and did the math, and including interest, we paid off just shy, and I'm talking like $20 shy, of $250,000 in 4 years and 11 months. Pretty awesome. There was a lot of times where, as we were doing the budget and setting aside, several $1,000s towards student loans, I really wanted to just tell my husband, you know what? Forget it. We'll make the minimum payment on the loans. Let's just take, this money that should be ours and go and do something fun. Let's take a trip. There's so many times where I wanted to say that, and there were a few times where we would just sit and speculate about what is life going to be like when we don't have the student loans to pay for. It's been hard, and I always think about it was a saying that referred to weight loss. Being out of shape is hard, getting into shape is hard, staying in shape is hard. Pick your hard is basically the theme of it. And going through that process, I always thought about, it would have been hard to stay in debt, because there would always be that chunk of money that didn't really belong to us. And if anything did happen to our incomes, we were sunk. We still had to make those debt payments, but we wouldn't have the money to do it. So, staying in debt was going to be hard. Getting out of debt was hard. Staying out of debt is actually kind of hard, especially nowadays with how easy it is to use credit cards and to get a car loan and all that sort of stuff. It actually is kind of hard to stay out of debt. But, pick your hard. What is the hard that you're willing to do? And we were willing to do the hard work to get out of debt, and are willing to do the hard work to stay at least mostly out of debt. So that was our debt-free journey. If you are on your own debt-free journey, I'm rooting for you. You can do this. It's a long, hard road, and you're gonna feel like you're banging your head against a wall and it's miserable. But trust me, it's worth it at the end. It really is. When you get to that point of making that final payment, and then you go to do your budget the next time when you don't have any debt, and you go, wow, look at all this money that I can do whatever I want. Don't give up. If you're contemplating going on a debt-free journey, it's going to be hard work. It is. There's no two ways about it. It's not going to be easy. You kind of have to constantly be on your guard about how you're spending your money and where it's going, and and all of that. And it's a challenge, but again, it's worth it. It really, really is. I haven't run into a single person who's gone, gosh, I wish I wouldn't have gotten out of debt. Like, the only thing you can do at the end of that debt-free journey, if you've achieved being debt-free, you've won. If you've gone through a debt-free journey yourself, tell your story in the comments below. Give us a quick update, because I can honestly say that in the process of going debt-free, I needed a lot of encouragement, and I needed a lot of that motivation to keep me going. And some of that motivation came from other people talking about their debt-free journey and what it was like being on the other side. So, anybody who's on your own debt-free journey, leave them some hope in the comments below that it is possible, and it is so worth it. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on anything to come. I'll see you soon.